Yeah, I mean, like we're in the second lockdown in the UK, so like it's kind of, I don't know, I guess because we did it the first time, we know kind of what to expect.
Yeah.
But nothing really that different this time, where you can kind of pretty much like do anything you want still. You just can't go to the pubs or to eat food. I mean, I'm still in London at uni, because uni is still open for us, so we still have to come in and kind of work, which is nice because I'm still working as well. My family live in Yorkshire, which is like the north of the country.
Yeah.
So I haven't really seen them for a while, but it's fine. I'll hopefully see them at Christmas. Fingers crossed.
You were back in Yorkshire for a part of the lockdown, though, right?
Yeah. So the first lockdown we had in started in March.
March.
Yeah, time between March and the end of May, and then that's when I made the project with my mum and about PTSD. I think my upbringing has kind of shaped me in my art. I think because I kind of experienced some stuff that means I wasn't very sheltered,
Mm-hmm.
uh, kind of like personal family issues, and kind of I was like brought up by a single mother, and kind of watching her like in like quite a raw way experience her own life kind of show me and kind of made me grow up quite fast. And then kind of having this, I guess realizing I was gay at quite a young age and having to deal with that, and kind of being mixed race and being raised by a black woman. I was kind of instantly thrown into the world of identity politics from a really young age. And that, I guess, kind of shaped me in terms of I needed to just from a young age understand myself and understand to find a way to be confident with myself and use that, to kind of navigate spaces and not let people take advantage of me. And I kind of think that kind of manifested itself in my art by just creating for myself first and foremost and trying to document these issues in a way that's personal to me rather than in the way we've kind of seen it before.
Is Yorkshire a very open place or is it quite conservative?
So I was born in London and then I moved to Yorkshire when I was quite young, but it's just the town I lived in was called Huddersfield.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Huddersfield. And it's kind of just, I would say, quite close-minded. I didn't really see myself represented there at all. And because I was kind of, I guess, growing up in like high school, and, people are like, if they suss that you might be gay, they're just like, I'm going to relentlessly bully this person. And I kind of think that was partly because there's kind of this culture there that's, to fit in, you have to be like this kind of person, you have to have these set of goals and you have to live this certain way of life. And if you don't do those things, then you're just like this complete freak.
Were you kind of the only freak in your circle?
Oh, and I definitely, I think now growing up and seeing other people like express themselves after high school as well, like a lot of people from the town I grew up, I'm just like, why were you like such a hater then? Like you are interesting now. I don't understand why you were so like, it's quite clear to me they were projecting on me rather than kind of actually being horrible, I think. So I was taking pictures from like a really long, from a really young age. Like my parents would have like iPhones, and I was just obsessed with like using those to take pictures of things. And I don't really know. I can't really pinpoint a moment in which I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. But I know I was really, really interested in film. And at first, I wanted to kind of make films and be like a director. And every kid's like, I'm gonna make like the next Star Wars. And then I think that probably manifested itself into like taking pictures. I remember getting a camera when I was quite young and just taking pictures of like everything really. And then as I got older, I would just continually take pictures of my friends and where I was growing up. And then eventually went to art college and then came to uni, to study here.
Would you say you developed your style in uni or outside of it?
Yeah, I think my actual experimentation really kicked in when I went to Leeds College of Art, in 2016. That's when I really got the chance to like be a bit different. It was the first time I'd like ever had art education solely, and two, it's like art education that was so like forward thinking. And they really, really hammered into us from day one that there's no such thing as failure and we want you to just explore. And like the whole course was just designed for us to go in and just make things and get constant feedback and be around other young people who are also like just creating all the time, which was just like I guess to me at that age was just like the most amazing thing. I'd never experienced it. And I think like that kind of where I kicked off my experimentation processes and kind of looking into how I could to make an image go further than just a picture. And then uni is where I've really kind of pushed myself, because I study fine art photography, and this course really pushes us to not just look at images in the most kind of forward-thinking way. They kind of ask us to explore how we can create an image, make it interesting, tell a story through it. I think I probably started in like around first year of college, for that 2016 again for me. I remember so I would experiment a lot with film at the time, like actual film photography. And it kind of came from, we'd shoot something in the morning, run down to the lab, get it processed, and then in the afternoon just like spend the afternoon getting the prints, then just like sticking them into each other. And then I think there was one shoot I did in 2000 and it was a couple of shoots in 2008, 2017, I think that was the year. And I had this really bad printer in my house. Like my mum just had like a really like a shit printer. And I was just like printing with it, and like the lines it left and kind of the marks it made was really interesting to me, because I literally had no control over it. Like that was just the way it was going to come out. And that was so interesting that it added this like texture and like layer to the image that I really had no control over. And like, again, like as I was saying previously, made the images more than just a picture. Especially because like a lot of the stuff we were doing, like I was really focusing on textures at the time, and that was like a really interesting way to get textures by printing it and scanning it. And the equipment I had wasn't expensive, and that's kind of why it looked quite bad, but good in like an interesting way.
I still see that like printing, scanning.
Yeah.
Your current work, I think
now it's kind of progressed into kind of like being more aware of the choices I make, such as paper sizes, paper styles, doing little random things. Like I did a project recently where I like burn all the paper and then put it in the printer and like just let the printer deal with the chaos that created, and almost broke my printer a few times doing that as well. Wouldn't recommend anyone does that. But yeah, that was quite fun.
I also see a lot of unnatural colors in your work. Can you tell me like how you approach color?
Yeah, I think it's especially like of late as well. Like I maybe feel like a project I did myself, like my self-portrait and stuff, which is like for a project I made called For the Days When, and like I was kind of in a bad space mentally. I wasn't having a good time, and I have been for many years anyway, but it kind of moving to London and being kind of really isolated, but also not at the same time, just being away from my family, everything, like away from everything I knew, kind of forced me to be really kind of like irrespective of myself, and forced me to be really like kind of aware of how I was feeling. And that was that I had like an altered view of my reality and perception of myself. And one way of discussing that in my work is by making sure the colors are kind of, I guess, ultra like sensitive and ultra vibrant, because that's how I felt. And I guess as well through the distortion of certain like images and making people look in certain ways is a conversation around how our realities can kind of be blurred and obstructed and kind of enhanced by struggling with mental health.
I feel like the vibrancy of London, but I know London is pretty dark and dreary all the time, so you have to really go hyper-natural with the colors to show that.
Last thing, it's kind of dark. Like I guess like you say with New York, like it doesn't stop. Nothing here stops. And even when it is dark, it's still bright because there's so much light pollution. And like I guess that I probably added to how I was feeling, because I'm living somewhere that's so intense. Everything in my life just became pretty intense, and I thought that's probably the best way of me talking about it. And I know that the more I experiment, the better I'm getting at this conversation out there.
I see, like looking through your stuff, the intensity just keeps getting intense.
That seems like something that is intense. So I hope that I think I'm really interested in the style I'm working with at the moment. So the kind of using the paper I'm using and kind of like looking at the textures I'm creating and how that can kind of like, you know, work with the vibrancy of the colors and the distortion and understand the story that this is kind of creating for one, the work I'm making, and two, for myself. I think it's kind of, I'm in a better space mentally now, and that's really good for me to be able to look kind of back, because I can kind of pinpoint certain things that happened or certain emotions and kind of work on them whilst I'm not actually experiencing them, which makes it kind of easier to do. But at the moment, I kind of want to keep pushing it to kind of combine my personal work and then kind of use that style to create my kind of own like visual language, which I can then give to other people and work and collaborate with more people.
Mhm.
And make it into kind of an art, really, rather than just photography. Like, yeah, so that was like the whole kind of journey of her PTSD has been really interesting, because it's kind of the whole photo shoot, the kind of the idea of the shoot was me kind of reflecting on me when I was younger and not understanding what she was going through, and just kind of seeing this woman who was, you know, trying her best to look after me and my sister, but also fighting these demons I just couldn't comprehend because I was just too young and too unaware. She's unfortunately suffered a lot of very severe racism, especially in her childhood, and through situations that she's been through. I've left her with PTSD, and kind of, you know, more recently she's had a diagnosis of PTSD, and also had EMDR therapy, which has kind of made this conversation around mental health for us both a bit easier, because we can really understand what she's actually experiencing. And it's been really positive because she can kind of, you know, talk about her experiences in a more constructive way, because she can understand what's actually happening, and so can I. So the kind of photo series with her, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's nice to kind of look back on a situation that was hard and make work about it. Because even though it was all going through that time, it was kind of around a time where she was in therapy and it was getting better. And it became more of like a, you know, I guess we were kind of talking about this like PTSD as a thing detached from her rather than it being something she's experiencing, which kind of made it a bit easier. I think it's been really good for our relationship, because mental health has played such a huge part in both our lives. And even though we're like best friends, we didn't really talk about it in like the most constructive way, because we didn't really understand that that's what was happening. So kind of being able to talk about it and kind of accumulate to this place where it's a piece of work I can put out and I talk about publicly.
Mm-hmm.
It's just exciting for us both, really, and it kind of shows a milestone in her life, importantly, and yeah, mine too.
Was the diagnosis really recent?
The diagnosis, oh, I don't know actually. I feel like the diagnosis, it feels recent, but I know it was in the past couple of years.
Okay, so fairly recent.
But I mean, the way that I don't know how it works in America, but the way the kind of Black women and Black people are failed by mental health services definitely played a part in her recovery. I remember her being asked by her GP if she'd ever been a criminal or committed a criminal act, and kind of compared her PTSD to her fear of spiders at one point. And it took her a really long time to get to a point where she was taken seriously, one, and then given the correct therapy in order to get better and kind of move on from what happened in her life.
Yeah, I think misdiagnosis is such a thing that permeates every medical system. And it's so rooted in racial biases and also gender biases as well. It's messed up.
Yes, that is the word. I like that. I think a lot, because especially in lockdown, like I really didn't have, like I went home for a start at the beginning of lockdown. So I kind of just had me, my sister, and my mum to like take pictures of. And then like my kind of more self-portraiture style project for the days when I did that, I wasn't in a great place, and I didn't really understand how to talk about it on anyone else. I just didn't know how to make this into some kind of shoot that would require other models. Especially when you're talking about something so personal, it's really like, I guess it can be quite hard to make this into an idea that you can articulate properly for other people to kind of work with you on. So I knew that the best thing I could do was just take pictures of myself, because that conversation wouldn't need to be had and I can experience it and do it at my own pace and just rely on myself, basically. And I think doing more of it, like I shot a project with Gap and Dairy recently, and like did a self-portrait for that and included myself in it. And I think that's kind of helped me with my own like self-image, like using myself as, you know, like the model or the, you know, the storyteller, and doing it well as well and successfully has shown me that I'm quite resourceful and can use myself for these projects. In the same way I'm making other people look good, I can always make myself look good whilst telling a story. If that makes sense.
It's always about using the camera as an instrument.
Definitely, and it's always the first step as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the first step. When you've got it, there's just a whole world you can explore with that. I think it's definitely both. I think it's definitely documentation because I've always had a need to document everything around me and what I'm doing and how I see the world, and that's just kind of something that's followed me throughout this process. And I think with a lot of artists as well, like, especially like fine art, it's such a kind of like solitary like practice. Like a lot of it comes from you and your personal experiences and your emotions and your understanding of the world around you. Right. And it can be hard to kind of separate what you make in yourself, and when you don't make something good, you kind of feel bad about yourself, or like, you know, if you don't make work, you feel like you're not being productive. Because especially when a lot of the work is personal to you,
yeah,
you have your own way of telling other people what you've experienced, especially if talking to people is hard, or it's kind of, you know, you don't really want to use words as a way of communication. And I think that, you know, I think it's really therapeutic, honestly, because it allows you to have these conversations with yourself and understand what's important to you more. Let alone being at art school, like you're constantly like critiqued on how productive you are. And I think Instagram has this way of reducing kind of process. So it makes it like everyone just makes things all the time. And that makes you feel like you have to also contribute to that. When in reality, there's so many steps that go into making something, and someone could post something that they made like months ago. But you don't get that whole journey. You just get that they made this one piece of work. And then you see how many likes they've got and how much attention they get, and you know how the world engages with what they've made. And I think there's like a pressure behind that, you know, and how like productivity is like a measure of your worth. But I think it's important occasionally to kind of step back from that and realize that like that's kind of a very capitalist way of looking at art, really. And we're all obviously it's all ingrained into us. But it's just one of those things that, you know, deep down it doesn't actually matter. Your productivity is important to you rather than for anyone else's benefit.
What role do you think art will play in an increasingly capitalistic society now?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously, like, I think it's the kind of integration of social media and the way that plays a part in art. I think the role it will play is kind of like, I think at the moment, it just feels like it's like I'm going like I guess hyperspeed. Like if everything's going so fast, and it's just like just the need to make, and be successful. Now, like a lot of people feel this way, like you're in art school in London at 20 and you feel like you should already be an established artist because, you know, the people you see around you are doing so well. And you just feel like you have to do that as well. And it kind of almost feels like, for me personally, I know people also agree, like, you don't really feel like a student. You just feel like you're living in a city and working. And you need to continue doing that and always be successful.
Yeah. I feel that way in New York. When I came to art school here, I forgot I was a student for a while.
Yeah, I forget. And then I come into uni, like, I'm now like, oh yeah, I'm until like 22, it's fine. Relax. I've got so much life left in me.
Yeah.
And you're going to do so many interesting things. And there's just such a, like, it is that a specialization around being like, 22-year-old success or 20-year-old success. And they're still studying, but they're, doing the most. And it's like, that's great if you are, but also if you're not, that's like also literally fine. And you will, as long as you're true to yourself and you're authentic and you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
There are a few. I'm currently right now, making a zine with a small publication run by a friend and his sibling and his friend. The publication is called Bikini State, and they've asked me to make a little zine about nightmares and dreams. That should be coming out in the new year at some point, I think. But yeah, I'm currently working on that alongside some other things that I don't know if I can talk about, but yeah.